Hello everyone, my name is Shan Sweeney and welcome to my Unreal Engine 4 tutorial series. This tutorial has been going over guns and projectiles, line traces, that kind of thing. So to get started, we're obviously going to need to make a new project. However, the first thing before we can do that, we actually want some gun assets to use for this project. So if you go to Marketplace and type in weapon, and then if you check free here, a bunch of stuff will actually come up. But the four I want to look at are these four. Now these are free assets. Two of them are a little more sci-fi looking. Two of them are like kind of generic looking. So I'm going to be using military weapons dark, but you can actually use any one of these for this, and it'll work. It should work fine. The only problem with this is that it only goes up to 4.21 in terms of engine versions. However, we still can use this in the most recent version of the Unreal Engine, but first you're going to have to install a different version of the engine in order to get that asset into a project. So you're going to have to download this engine, a different version, create a project in that version, and then you're going to have to add those weapons to that project in order to get it into the newer version. So with that out of the way, once you have that done, I already done that. Once you have that done, you can actually start a new project. So we will start a new one. Do game. We're going to do first person. We're going to do no starter content. I don't really need any for this. And I'm just going to name this gun tutorial 2. So that'll load up. And in order to get those guns in there, I have another project with those already. And so once you have that, you can just right click the folder for it, click migrate, and yes, you can actually choose what assets you want, but we want all of them, so we're going to click OK. And then we're going to go to the folder for it, go to content, select folder, and we're going to copy that straight in there. Now once we have that, we can just exit out of this project, and we should now have those weapons. Now, quick overview of these assets. You get a number of things from it. You get one, the weapons. All these weapons have skeletons as well, which is very, very nice, and bullets and all that good stuff. These guns also have animations to them. And the cool part about this is their animations have sounds and particle effects to them. But we can also use different particle effects, different sounds as we see fit. So this is just a very nice free to use gun assets that we're going to be using for this purpose. So we're going to do a few things first before we can really get started with all this. So for the first person character, we want to edit this, and there's two ways to get to do this. Is you can just click on the character in the scene and click edit, or you can just go to first person BP blueprints and then click that. Either way, we want to open the blueprint up. So we already have a bunch of scripting here, but we actually want to get rid of some of this. So I'm going to get rid of this. We're going to get rid of this box. We're going to move this up. And then we're going to get rid of this, get rid of this, and then we'll get rid of that. We're not using VR or controllers or anything like that, so I'm just going to get rid of those. So compile, save, and if we click play right now, we have pretty much a really basic setup. We have a character that doesn't really have a body, a gun that shoots these wimpy balls, and that's about it. That's all we have. But there are a few problems with this, and we're going to improve those. So the first things first is we want to change how the firing works. So I'm actually just going to disconnect this real quick, and we're going to delete this as well as this, because we're going to be doing something different in order to calculate the shooting information. So if you noticed, if we do spawn actor from class, it needs a spawn transform. And we can use this to spawn projectiles, but it needs some kind of transform in order to know like where to spawn it and what direction the projectile needs to go. So we're going to be doing, oh yeah, we also want to keep this because it's just a firing animation. But anyways, we're actually going to create a function for this. So if you over here do function, we're going to call this calculate shooting info. It's going to have an output. So if we go over here, click new parameter, change this to a transform, not a rotator, to a transform. As I was mentioning earlier, the spawn actor needs a transform. And so that's what we're going to be calculating, and we'll just call this projectile transform. Going to disconnect this because we're going to be adding in some scripting here. Compile, save. Now we branch off of this. We're going to want line trace by channel. We're going to be using a line trace in order to calculate our transform that we need in order to spawn our projectile. So, line trace by channel takes in two inputs, a starting vector and an end vector. And what we're going to be using for this essentially comes from the camera. So we want the world location of the camera, get world location. We also want the rotation of the camera, so get world rotation. And the location of this camera is actually going to be the starting point of this line trace, but we need to tell it where to go. What's the end point of this line trace? And so we're going to be using the rotation of the camera for that, and we're going to bring this out and do get forward vector, and then we're going to multiply this value by a float. And this, I'm going to do 25,000. We do want this to be a decently high number because bullets can, go far, so that's why we want that to be a pretty high number. And essentially this is going to draw a line trace from the center of the camera straight forward until it hits something, or until it ends 25,000 units later. So now that we have this, I'll just show this off real quick. So we want to do draw debug type for duration if we want to actually see the line trace, and then we will add the function calculate shooting info. Now if we go into the first person shooter, we can see when we click, it draws a line trace until it hits something. Now, if you can also tell, the crosshair is not quite centered, and we will be fixing this, but we won't be fixing it in this video. We will fix it later. For now, we just want to focus on the line traces. So now that we have that, we need to do some more stuff here. So if we go to viewport, we're actually going to make some changes here too as well. We can just get rid of all this VR stuff. We don't need that. We're going to get rid of these guns. We don't need that as well. And if we go to the mesh, we're actually going to add another skeletal mesh. Make sure it's a skeletal mesh, not a static mesh. And we're going to just label it gun. And then we're going to use one of our new assets for this. I'm just going to use the assault rifle. You can use something else, but I'm just going to use the assault rifle. And we want to actually parent socket this to the grip point, which is essentially what the other gun was attached to. Compile and save. Oh, we missed something. Oh, we don't need this. We'll get rid of that because we don't need that. So now, if we click play, you can see we have a gun. But the hand is also a little bit off. That is, again, something we'll be fixing later when we polish this all up. So now we have our gun there. We can go back to our calculate shooting info because we're going to be using something from this gun. So if we go all the way to the left here, and we can drag this gun out, now we have that skeletal mesh. We're going to branch off of it, do get socket location, and we need a socket name. So, as I mentioned earlier, these guns actually have their own skeleton. And there's a few components on here. We have the grip, we have the clip, the slide, the trigger, and then these two, a muzzle flash and an ammo eject. What we want is the muzzle flash, because that's where we want the bullet to come from. So, now if we go back into our calculate shooting info function, we can type in muzzle flash. And this is something we'll be using in order to calculate our transform. So now what we want to do is we want the information of the trace hit. And if you bring this out, you can do break hit result, click this arrow, and it gives you a ton of information. Now we're not going to be using all this, we're just going to be using two different ones. We'll be using impact point and trace end. Oh, but I'm also going to copy this return node because it's going to be using two different transforms, whether it actually hits something or if it doesn't hit something. And we can also create a branch. You can either right click, type in branch, or hold B and left click to create a branch. And we want to connect this here, and whether or not we actually hit something to here. So now what we want to do is we're going to bring this value out, this transform out, and we're going to do get look at find look at rotation, sorry. And we're going to, this is going to be the starting point, and we want the impact point to be the target. Essentially what this is doing is it's calculating the rotation information for from the muzzle flash point, which is just the barrel of the gun, to wherever we impacted. However, that's only giving us a rotation. But we do want to branch off from here and do make transform, but like I said, that only gives us a rotation. We need a location as well, and we're simply going to be using the barrel as the location, and the find look at rotation as the rotation. And this, finally, we can hook up back into this, to the return node, and that is the information that we have calculated in order to spawn our projectile. So now we can hook up the true to this, but we also want a false scenario, so where it doesn't actually hit something. And we're going to be doing the exact same thing. We're going to do find look at rotation, and we're going to be hooking up trace end into that. And once again, we're going to do make transform and hook up this in the same fashion. And then we can hook that up to the return node, and then we can hook up the false into that return node. And that is all you need for the shooting information. Actually, I did make one mistake here. You do want this. Do you want to add these two together as the endpoint? Okay, there we go. So once again, we have a line trace, but that's about it. We have calculated our shooting information. Now we actually need to use this information to spawn a projectile, which we will do in the next tutorial. So thank you for watching the first one. Please, we'll watch the second one, and like if you liked it, subscribe and whatnot, and see you guys later.